It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host, O.
On today's episode of the Share Podcast, Clay Cutts shares with us some amazing resources and tips for newcomers struggling with alcoholism and drug abuse. Clay is the author of Beyond the Bottle and the founder of the Sergeant Sober Bootcamp. Join us now as he gives our listeners valuable insights on how to get and stay sober today. Hi, Clay. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, O. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling great. Another day in paradise.
That's exactly how I'm doing, man. Living in paradise.
Good.
All right. So let's get started. Today, our featured guest is Clay Cutts, a psychotherapist who specializes in the treatment of drug addiction and alcoholism, the author of Beyond the Bottle and the creator of the Sergeant Sober Bootcamp. So Clay, tell us about how your life is today, your home life, your practice, the book. Take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery.
Okay, will do. I guess the short answer is extraordinarily busy.
Yes.
That's the way I like it. From the work side, I work for a substance abuse treatment facility that specializes in working with professional men and women. So that's what I do most of the day. But I also have a private practice on the side where I see men and women who, for the most part, my patients struggle with substance abuse, but I also work with folks who have co-occurring disorders, depression, anxiety, those sorts of things. Also do some assessments for a local drug court program. So, and then of course, I've got the book that I wrote that just came out earlier this year, and building a business around my Sergeant Sober Bootcamp, which is a video-based recovery program. So as you can tell, my days are pretty full, but of course I make time to work recovery in there too. I've got several meetings that I go to religiously. I put them on my calendar, on my schedule, and those do not get moved. I'm fairly active in my home group and try to stay up with what everybody's doing and try to practice the principles every day to the best of my ability.
Absolutely. That's really all you can do most of the time. Now, I also saw on your website about video game addiction. Is that as prevalent as alcoholism?
It's not as prevalent, but it's getting to be. As technology develops, especially our young people, are changing very, very quickly. The impacts that video gaming, it's not just video game addiction, the sort of the broader category is technology addiction. That includes social media, that includes pornography, that includes gaming is a big part of it. But what's happening to Americans, to people in the world, especially young people, their brains are developing in such a way that the relationships are damaged and their ability to form authentic interpersonal relationships is much impaired. Interestingly, it's easy to think of a video game or spending a little extra time on Facebook as much less dangerous than using heroin or drinking alcohol or something like that. And in some ways it is because you don't have the toxin involved. However, the neurochemical reactions that are involved are identical to what goes on when someone uses a drug. And so that's where sort of true addiction can develop from these technology-related sources.
Gotcha. I have heard a little bit about that. Okay. Well, great. So, let's talk about recovery. How much clean time do you have, and when is your anniversary date?
I've got all day today, and that's a miracle. My sobriety date is November 16th, 2006.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And how old were you the first time you drank or used drugs? And more importantly, how did that make you feel?
Well, it's a great question because especially the second part of it, I was about 15 the first time I drank. I drank some liquor with two of my buddies in one of their basements.
Okay.
And it made me feel like I had found the solution to all my problems. I had always felt sort of, other than, felt different. I had friends, but I just always felt kind of odd. And when I drank that first time, I was no longer shy. I was no longer afraid of girls. I was no longer, I was the life of the party. It was fundamentally changed who I was.
Very reminiscent to what most of us go through. It's almost parallel to how my story is. So, Clay, looks like you're all warmed up here, so I'm going to turn this show over to you. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery up until today. So Clay, take it away.
All right. Thanks, so. So when I tell my story, I try not to spend a whole lot of time talking about the drinking part and the negative part, because my guess is that most people out there know how to get drunk, and that most people's interest is in how to stay sober. So I try to spend a little more time on that. And, I love hearing people's stories because it's better than Hollywood sometimes.
Yes.
I've been to so many meetings and speaker meetings, and I thought, wow, that would make a great movie. My story's not really like that. Most of my battles were internal. Most of my bottoms were, emotional and psychic. So I'll try to sort of lay out what it was like for me so everyone can get a feel for what my bottom really looked like. So I guess, I was talking a minute ago about feeling different at 15 when I first drank that alcohol. And I guess what that started with was going back to age I was about 7, and I was at school, or it was after school, and the parents were there for a meet the teacher kind of conference, and so they arranged for childcare in the gym. So all of us kids were in the gym playing games, and the teacher decided to read us a story. And so I decided for some reason, I love stories, all kids do. I was always a big reader, but I decided for some reason that I just don't want to be involved in that group. So I walked over to the other end of the gym, and I just sat down on one of those accordion mats that every gym in the universe has, I think. And so just sitting there, sort of staring at the wall, refusing to be part of the group. About 10 minutes later or so, the parents start filtering to pick up their kids. And I remember my dad coming in and looking around at the group of kids, looking for me, and then realizing that I was on the other end of the gym. I saw this sort of look come over his face that I didn't, understand at the time, but it was this sort of, what's my kid doing over there? That's kind of weird. And it was sort of the first time that I really saw myself as different. And the way that manifested over the years was that I became a chameleon, able to sort of be part of different groups, but never fully part of any group. And so I always felt apart from my peers in a lot of ways. When I discovered alcohol, hanging out with my 2 buddies in that basement that night, everything changed. I could do anything. And alcohol quickly became part of my life. And first it was weekends through high school, and then college it was a little bit more. And then after college, it was a lot. I got a job at a golf course when I graduated from college, and it was just wide open drinking. We would just drink during the day, drink at work. And of course, it was a horrible job for a budding alcoholic, but I fit right in there. I was right in the middle of it. And so, I went through about that time. Soon after that, I met my wife and we got married. And alcohol at first was a fun part of our lives, but pretty quickly became, sort of a central negative theme. But I drank solid for another, 15 years before things got really bad. And by that point, I was a daily drinker. I was getting drunk practically every night, and it was starting to affect my work and my health. My liver hurt, my stomach and my esophagus were always raw, and I never had any quality sleep. So I was, chronically fatigued. And so this all sort of blew up one day at work. I worked in technology at the time, and I was at work hungover and maybe a little bit drunk, I don't know. And this manager comes out to have a conversation with me about normal stuff. And I just blew up on him. I just absolutely started screaming at him like a crazy person. It was like a cubicle farm, and I see these little heads pop up all over, like marmots or whatever, the little meerkats popping their heads up.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a crazy guy. Look, crazy guy. And I was absolutely insane. And I remember going home that night. My wife was out of town, and I got good and drunk. And I remember laying on the floor and just absolutely could not picture going through another day like I had just gone through. That was a typical day. That wasn't unusual. And I just couldn't picture going through another day. And I didn't know the word at the time, but it was hopeless. I had absolutely no hope left in me. And I wanted to die. I really did. And that was my focus that night of killing myself. I tried to drink enough to give myself the courage to kill myself. And I just somehow couldn't make it happen. Thank goodness. But I remember laying there all night and the sun coming up, and I walked into the bathroom, and I was sick, and just felt horrible. I looked in the mirror, and I was gone, and replaced was this sort of pale, sick, broken person. And I just remember sitting on the edge of the tub where I could see myself in the mirror and just saying, God, please just either kill me or make me better. I can't do this anymore. And I had a really cool experience at that point. I sort of felt this, just a moment of just sort of calmness and warmth. And just, I sort of knew that everything was going to be okay. And it was just for, a second or two, but it was there. It was real. And I remember just thinking, wow, maybe I don't have to live like this. I don't know what that means, but maybe I can do something different. And a really great story would go, and I never drank again. But my story doesn't go that way.
Right. I hear you.
And so I did drink some more, but it wasn't a whole lot more, another few weeks. And I called a rehab facility and told them I needed help. And they said, yep, come in, you qualify. And I went in and actually talked myself out of the medical detox and into an IOP, an outpatient program. I didn't tell them I was actually having hallucinations. I didn't tell them that I was seeing bottles of bourbon floating around the room talking to me, because I knew what they did to guys that said that, And so I had no idea how sick I was. I mean, that's dangerous. That's a life-threatening situation there. And I know that now, but I didn't at the time. So I got into the treatment center and started going through the program. I didn't want to be there, and I was kicking and screaming. But something cool happened that first week that I was there. There was a social worker that was facilitating the group, and there was another woman there who was sort of an assistant or whatever. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was there as a paraprofessional. She was actually in recovery. And so later, I guess midway through the week, she speaks up and she shares and she introduces herself and says, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. And she started talking about alcoholism in a way that was shocking to me, because for me, it was a deep, dark secret. I didn't want anybody to know how much I drank and when I drank. I didn't want people to know that I was not okay. I didn't want people to know that I wanted to die. That was all shame and fear-based yuck that I was carrying around. But this woman talked about those things in such open ways that I just literally remember looking around at everybody else in the room going, is anybody else as shocked as I am? And nobody was. And I realized, oh, you can talk about this stuff in a way that's sort of honest, and which seems like such a dumb thing now, but I, honest to goodness, had no clue that was allowed. So that was a really big turning point in my sobriety. And right after that, they had me going to AA meetings, which I wasn't happy about. And I ended up seeing this woman at an AA meeting and slowly put it together that, oh, I see why she's there and who she is and how this works. Clearly, my brain was pretty foggy at that point. But so I started going to the meetings more. And it was about that point, after maybe I was 2 weeks into a treatment program, where I said, just something else happened to me, another sort of psychic change where I just sort of surrendered. And of course, at the time, I didn't have the term for it, but I surrendered and I stopped. The big book talks about we'll cease fighting everyone and everything. And I did. And I just stopped. I just gave up fighting. And as soon as I did that, man, I got a lot better really fast. And I had all this extra energy to focus on recovery and to focus on solutions and to focus on getting better and not to focus on my resentments and my fear and my anger and my rage. And so I got a lot better really fast. And so, well, back up just a little bit. I did a couple of things not right early on. One of the things was I didn't get a sponsor right away. Could I do it over again? I would have gotten a sponsor the very first day I ever walked into an AA meeting, even if it was a horrible sponsor, because I suffered unnecessarily at the beginning because I didn't have that contact with somebody that I could reach out to when I really, really needed it. I would have asked for help more from the men in the program, even though the men in that group did a good job of surrounding me and holding me up. But those are some of the things I would have done better. So over the years, I've gradually gotten stronger and better, and want to sort of talk about a couple of things that sort of the most important things I think that I've learned from the program. And gosh, this could be a list of 100 things long. There's 4 things that specifically helped me a lot that sort of contribute to what I call my recovery. The first one is I learned in AA how to deal with others. I had no idea how to get along with other human beings. People were always either a hindrance, or they were a tool, or they were something to be manipulated, or they were something to meet my needs.
Right.
I didn't realize that I was supposed to be a servant to people in the world. And when as I've learned to be more and more of a servant, and again, I don't have any of this down. This is all stuff I'm working on. When I learned to be a servant to my higher power by way of the people around me, my life gets much, much better. The second thing that I've learned is that being sober is, I guess being a drunk was not actually a bad thing. That I actually had to go through every single bit of pain and suffering that I went through, because had I not done that, I wouldn't be the person that I am now. And I would not be able to authentically serve the people around me. I wouldn't be worthwhile to the newcomer without that suffering. The third thing that I want to talk about that sort of is one big thing in itself, and that's building and maintaining a spiritual condition. I always heard people talk about, quote, the spiritual part of the program. And I've come to realize that there is no such thing, that it is a spiritual program. And the solution for addiction that we have now, maybe that'll change in the future, but the solution we have now is a spiritual one. And so I spend a lot of time developing that spiritual condition and building a relationship with my higher power, because that's the only way that I can beat this addiction, because I am absolutely powerless over my alcoholism, and I've proven it 100 times over. And so the fourth thing that has really sort of become my overarching goal for my life is to become emotionally honest and purely authentic in all my dealings with people. And that's a huge order. And I didn't realize that was my goal until I started working with other people in a professional setting, which is sort of the next part of my story, is that along the way I decided that I was part of the reason that I suffered like I did was to be able to be most effective in helping others. So I decided that I wanted to do that kind of work professionally. So 2009, I started working on figuring out how to help other people who suffer from addiction. And it quickly became clear that going back and getting another degree was what I needed to do. And so I went back and got a master's degree in social work. Then I became licensed psychotherapist in the state where I live. And then I started working with people. And that's where some really cool things have started to happen for me. I've been able to interact with people and share my experience, strength, and hope from a recovery perspective, from an AA perspective, 12-step perspective, but also from a professional therapeutic perspective. I'm blessed to be able to combine all those different types of thinking, and I've been really pleased to be able to really help some people. And of course, I don't help everybody. Some people don't match with me too well, but for the most part, I think I've been able to be pretty effective because of this combination of skills. So that's sort of where I am now. Going forward, upward and to the right is kind of what I think. I want to do what I've been doing so far, but help more and more and more people. And that's where the book comes in. I wrote this book. I've had a book under my skin, for years. I've always wanted to write one. I finally met a guy that's become a mentor, and he said, just do it, just write it. And so I did. And I sat down and I wrote Beyond the Bottle, and it's designed to be a low threshold entry into the world of recovery for people who don't want to do AA, and they maybe they can't afford a therapist, or they have a block against the whole spiritual nature of 12-step work. But this is a sort of a practical guide to what can I do now if I'm drinking or using drugs and I want to not do that. And that's how they get started. And then sort of the next part of that is my Sergeant Sober Boot Camp that I created. It's a video-based program where folks, they join the site and then they get a series of missions, and it's videos of me teaching. It has a lot of downloadable worksheets, and it's very interactive. And the idea is to teach people who are suffering from addiction, teach them how to learn new skills to replace their problematic skills. And the net effect is, a healthier person at the end of the program. So that's where I am. That's what I'm working on.
So that's your story.
That's my story. That's the brief version of it.
Perfect, Clay. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us.
Absolutely.
It's really an inspirational story because there's so many facets of it that I guess for many of us, at least for me, I remember when I first got clean and sober, when I was writing that Pink Cloud.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to start a treatment center. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to do the things that you've done, some of the things that you've managed to accomplish. The book that you talk about that's under your skin, when you first agreed to do the interview, I did a little due diligence and started looking up the things that you were working on. I went to your website and I go, wow, this guy has accomplished a lot of things. And I know that a lot of us as addicts and alcoholics, we want to do these things. We want to help people. Once you kind of grab a hold of it, you want to just give it away.
Sure.
Because that's the most important aspect of it. It's when you really start to recover. It's when you start to be that conduit for your higher power. I'm always, when people come to me and sponsees or parents of sponsees, they'll say, hey, Omar, thank you so much for helping my son. I'm like, HP, baby.
Yep.
They go, what do you mean? And they go, I have to give it. I am not the well, but I do enjoy being the pipe every once in a while.
Sure.
And I have to give credit where it's due. My higher power just comes in and helps me deliver a message of recovery because, left to my own devices, if I start talking about what, Omar's philosophy, we're in big trouble. So
yeah, that's one of the cool things that I've learned in recovery world is that there are a lot of sort of yin and yang kind of tenets, and that sort of power versus powerlessness and how they're really the same thing. And one of the things I've learned is that I'm not powerful enough to fix anyone, including myself. However, I can be that pipe, that conduit to a power that can. And I've had that experience, like you're saying, when I get to be that conduit, it's just an awesome thing to watch. It's awesome.
And feel. It's an awesome feeling that, I got one of the interviewees, Leanne, she says, I get God bumps.
Yeah.
So people call it goose pimples or whatever. She goes, I get God bumps.
Yeah.
And I go, I love that. That's beautiful. That's exactly the feeling that you get when you watch somebody, get the message.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal that from her.
The God bumps?
Yes.
It's good. It's great. I always say this too. They always say, man, what a great message. I go, listen, I'm just regurgitating to the best of my ability, buddy.
Right.
All right. All this stuff I got from my sponsor and from, my very close friends in the fellowship. I've got buddies of mine that now have, 20, 25 years that, when I met them, had 10, 15 years. And as you grow and you develop these relationships, the things that you pick up from them are the things that they picked up from their friends and their mentors and their sponsors. It's such a powerful fraternity, and it just keeps growing and just keeps giving. So anyway, your story is wonderful. There were so many parts about it. That part about there towards the end where you woke up, you were sitting on the bathtub, looking at yourself in the mirror. You said, God, just, take me out of this world or help me because I can't do this anymore. I remember those exact words coming out of my mouth in a different place, in Costa Rica where I live, in my living room, on my knees, asking whatever was out there, just, I'm done here.
Yeah, it's an awful place to be.
It's horrible, horrible. I was married. My wife was 6 months pregnant at the time. I had a thriving business, and I wanted to die.
Right.
And so, there's places that, what most people would look at and say, wow, this guy's got an amazing life. How could he be so ungrateful and so self-destructive? Once the disease has a hold of you, it's not going to let go.
No.
You have to have that spiritual awakening like you and I both did, where I felt that warmness. It was, for me, it was the night before where I prayed for it. I woke up the next day and I'm like, damn it, I'm not dead, But then I had this really small, this little thought popped into my mind that said, maybe you should go to one of those meetings that psychologist told you to go to 8 months ago. That was the thought.
Yeah.
Right? And I got up, didn't take a shower, put on my clothes, drove to that therapist's office, and I said, I need help.
Yeah.
And I've been going to meetings ever since. So, for me, at that point, I didn't recognize it as a God shot or as a spiritual awakening. But, later on, I realized that once I asked for the help, God gave me the strength that I needed to get myself to that meeting.
Right. Well, and that's something that I talk to people a lot, too, that people will call my office and they can't decide whether they're going to come to treatment or want to be referred to a treatment facility or therapy, or they want to go to NA or AA or something like that. And one of the things I tell them is, whatever you do something today, because that motivation is so fleeting. They call it moments of clarity, and that's what they are. Those moments come. That sort of what you were describing, that maybe I should go to one of those meetings. That moment comes, but then it goes away. It doesn't last forever. Tomorrow it might not be here. So I just encourage people, if you have that motivation, take advantage of it while it's there.
That's great. That's perfect. As a matter of fact, let's jump into the last part of the show that I call For the Newcomers.
Okay.
And for the newcomers, I ask you 5 questions about your early recovery, and you respond with inspiring and insightful answers that you can share with our newcomers. You ready?
I'm ready.
Perfect. All right. So number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
I think that list is fairly long, but I would say that the top of the list was my giant, overinflated ego was keeping me from getting sober. I insisted upon being the smartest guy in the room, and frankly, I often was. But I tried to translate those sort of logical and technical skills that I had into recovery skills, and it's not the right tool. It's like, there's a hammer and there's a screwdriver, and I didn't have either. I didn't have whatever I needed. And so I was too ego driven to just say, you know what, I just can't do this. And I'd please somebody help me. That was really a big barrier. And by the way, once I finally just said that, boy, it wasn't as hard as it seemed. And when I let people help me and let my ego be deflated a little bit, I got better really fast.
Yes, no, 100%. And for many of us, this question is pretty reminiscent and it's parallel to most stories. So yes, thank you. So number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
That's a fantastic question. And I think that I had that sort of spiritual moment right before I quit. But when I got into treatment and was working with the woman who was there, who was from the local AA group, I had a moment of surrender then. It was pretty cool because I didn't know what it was, but it happened one evening. I went to work during the day, then went to the therapy groups in the evening, then went home at night. And it was when I was at home, and I just had this sort of, sense that, okay, you can stop fighting everybody now. Clay, you're where you need to be. You can just be still and just let everything happen. You're on the right track now. Not necessarily words as much as just a sense of that. And I just remember this piece, and I went back to the next day. I got up and went to work, and then went to the therapy group. And as I walked in, I was a few minutes early, and I was the first patient there. The therapist who was facilitating the group was doing something, and she looked up and said, "Oh, hi, Clay, welcome." And then looked back down. Then she did a real quick double take to the point where it kind of startled me a little bit. And she said, "You look different." And then the other lady walked in and she looked at me and she said, "Did you change your haircut? You look different today." And the change in me was so dramatic that other people could actually see it in me. And that was a big turning point in my recovery.
Very powerful. Those are great aha moments. More God bumps.
Yep, absolutely.
So number 3, do you have a favorite book you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
This is a dangerous question for me because I am a reader. I've got 5 books going right now, I think. So, I think that the basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, as we call it, is a great book to really, really dig into. I joke with my patients at work sometimes. They'll say, life didn't come with an instruction manual. And I'll say, yes, it did. Here it is. And I hold up the big book and say, I challenge you to find a problem that I can't find a solution to in this book. So whenever I sponsor somebody, we spend a lot of time in the big book. So that would be my absolute number 1 recommendation.
Perfect. And then we can always plug your book in there, which would be, Beyond the Bottle. So I'm going to check that one out. Go ahead.
Available on Amazon.com.
Perfect. That's where I found it.
Yep.
So when we close up, you can list how we can contact you.
Okay.
So number 4, what was the best suggestion you have ever received?
Oh, my goodness. I was blessed to have a lot of really, really wise people in my life when I got sober. Probably the best thing that I was told was to not take myself so seriously.
Rule 62.
Yeah, Rule 62. Don't take yourself so damn seriously, Clay. You're really just not that important. What that helped me do was to get okay with just being okay. Because, the situation was that I felt driven to show everybody how smart and how successful and how generally awesome I was. But on the inside, I was, 30 seconds away from putting a pistol in my mouth. And so there's this huge dichotomy between what I showed you guys and what was, going on inside me. And then the truth of the matter is I'm just a guy doing the best I can. And, some days I get it right and some days I screw it up. But if I don't take myself too seriously, I get this permission, I get this space to just be okay. And that's okay. So that's the best advice I ever got.
Love it. Great advice. So, number 5, if you could give a newcomer only one suggestion, what would it be?
One suggestion for a newcomer, I would say make a decision, either be in or not. Decide if you're ready to get sober or if you're not. And if you're not, good luck. But if you're serious and you're ready to get sober, dig in, do everything you're told, shut your mouth, open your ears, go to meetings, dig in deep. I use the analogy of the savannah in Africa. Which gazelle gets eaten? It's the one off by himself. The gazelle in the middle of the herd is just as safe as he can be. So get into the middle of the herd, surround yourself with recovering people who have lots of good sobriety, ask for help. I guess this is more than one suggestion, isn't it? But
No, this is great, man. Trust me, most of the time, this is exactly what happens. And this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
All right. Half measures availed us nothing.
Nothing. Do it. Just do it. And I promise. Listen, if being sober sucked, nobody would do it. if being drunk was better than being sober, I'd go get drunk right now. But it's not. Being sober is awesome.
100%. Great suggestions, Clay. And before we say goodbye, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Well, actually, and I'll let you expand a little bit so that you can tell us what's the best way to get a hold of you. I want to know what's your favorite meeting and where that group is located. And then I want you to tell us how to get a hold of you, your website, about the books, whatever you want to put in there so we can add into the show notes.
Okay. That'd be awesome. I guess I have 2 favorite meetings. My current home group is called We Can Help. And it's on Robinson Road in Peachtree City, Georgia. That's my favorite just because that's where I spend most of my AA time. My sponsors there and all the really good people that offer me support every day and every week. But I've got another favorite meeting, which is the meeting where I got sober. And that's called the Horseshoe Group in Columbia, South Carolina. I know there'll always be a warm place in my heart because walking into that room the first time was without a doubt the scariest thing I ever did. I'll always be grateful to the folks there.
Perfect.
So how to get in touch with me? I have a couple of websites. My main website is claycuts.com. That's really the site for my private practice. You can also read about my book. I have a blog on there as well, a lot of videos, a lot of free resources for folks to take advantage of. I really encourage people to come and get engaged and leave comments and make it a conversation, not a lecture. I have another website called sergeantsober.com. That's where you can get access to my online video recovery program. And I've got a Facebook page, but the Facebook stuff is all the social media is linked from those websites. So
I will be listing all of that information on the show notes. Just go to the Share Podcast, and all the show notes will be there on the website. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.